Well, hey, it's Sean P. Neal, the host here at Fringe, and I am so excited to bring you this episode of Lead the People. Now, Lead the People provides you with a roadmap to realizing your full potential as an authentic people leader. And in each episode, Dr. Matt Pepsel, aka the godfather of talent optimization, well, he and his guests are going to explore a wide range of leadership topics and trends. And it's going to be really informative, and I promise you it will be engaging. So I don't want to hold you back any longer. Make sure you get everything you can out of this episode. It'll be packed full of great stuff. Let's get into it.
It's time to Lead the People, the show for aspiring leaders at every level. If you want to boost your self-confidence, get noticed, and maximize your impact by leading others, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Matt Pepsel. Ready to lead? Follow me. My very special guest is an Oklahoma native who moved to California with the goal of building leaders and cultivating change around the world. He has a mix of enterprise recruiting experience at HP and Google. He's an executive recruiter with Hewlett Packard, and he strives to enable the development of better technology for everyone, everywhere, highlighting the intersection of his career interests and passions. And he's also a brother to 3 siblings, a running enthusiast, and a LinkedIn wizard. He is Brian Phillips. Welcome to the show, Brian.
Hi, thank you for having me on, Matt. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm so glad that Kaylee introduced us. I'm really excited to be chatting with you today. Got a lot of great questions for you.
All right, I'm ready for them.
Well, let's get started with a little bit of background, though. What is it that drew you into this wonderful world of recruiting?
Well, gosh, the world of recruiting is definitely wonderful in a lot of ways. But I think what inspired me in the beginning was a passion for building high-performing teams. I was involved in a lot of leadership throughout college, and I would look at the people leading these organizations I was a part of, and I was a little fascinated by how they were able to really motivate a crowd, get us, excited around a mission, and, everyone really bought into what we were doing and how we were doing it. And so I started to kind of study what it took to be a leader and how these people were doing such great things in these, positions. And then on the other side, I was really passionate about technology, and I was really excited about the future and what we could do with technology. But I also knew that my brain didn't really work like an engineer, and I knew I wouldn't be as excited, doing that type of work every single day. So the intersection of being a part of innovative technology in the future while also being a part of building these high-performing teams was recruiting. And so now I get to feel a little bit of purpose by, helping shape the future of technology by hiring the right people for these teams, but in my own way. So it's been a really fun experience.
It's a super intentional path. And I tell you, it's why we're fast friends. You and I have a lot in common. Fundamental respect for leadership, for high performing teams. I do love technology as well. I've been in technology firms for as long as I can remember. But it took me a lot longer to figure it out. So I'm glad that you dialed in on that super early in your career. That's great.
Thank you. I'm really excited about it too. And it's been a fun, 3 years in the space. Recruiting is different than you imagine. When you're younger, you're like, oh, we're just going to dive in, it's going to be pretty easy. I'm just going to find a few people, and there's a lot more to it than that. But it's been a really fun, exciting experience. And I think every day is a little different as you recruit on different roles, and, technology advances and you need new expertise. So very fun space.
Yeah, and one of the reasons I was super excited to have you on the show, you've got this unique vantage point in that you're both a recruiter, as we've been talking about, but you're also a Gen Z leader. So I wonder if I might get your perspective, get that real Gen Z sort of insight if you can. The only claim to fame I have with Gen Z is I've made 3 of them, but a mystery to me. So I think the chance to get your firsthand perspective is huge. And one of the things I know that in our first conversation we had a while back, it's going back a couple weeks ago now, but you mentioned that Gen Z views work and life a little bit differently. And I wonder if you might just tell us a little bit more about what you mean by that.
Sure. Well, one, I'll say, congrats to you for making 3 Gen Z folks. We're a fun generation. I think we're an opinionated one, and we're a really excited one about the future. And at the end of the day, I think both Gen Z and other generations have the same goal, and that's to make a social impact, to do something empowering and inspiring for this world, and something that's going to really, extend beyond just us in our lifetime. But I think where maybe the difference comes in between Gen Z and some older and more progressed generations would be how we choose to live our lives. I think Gen Z, has this mentality of, hey, we work on our day to day so that we can live a really exciting life. And before, I feel like, it was really romanticized every single day from when you were younger to what are you going to do in your job? And, every single day is going to be focused around, your career. And I don't think that Gen Z doesn't want a life, where we're really excited and passionate about what we do on the day to day. But I think with the advancements of technology, we're realizing that, hey, like maybe, we can rely on these new technologies to help us get our work done a little more efficiently. And with some flexibility, we can both live our lives and do our day-to-day jobs really well. And so I think there's just a cultural shift happening right now. And both generations see things a little differently at the moment. But I'm hopeful that maybe we can meet somewhere in the middle as we keep going.
Yeah, I'm hopeful too. And I think you're right. I think the emphasis on both sides of the ledger, so to speak, I want to work hard. I don't see Gen Z in my own personal experience as being lacking motivation or work ethic or anything like that. But I think that it's a little bit, it shows up differently at work sometimes versus some earlier generations that might have really emphasized and stressed one side of the ledger over the other. And I think that that's just, it's unrecognizable perhaps, but that's where I get a little uncomfortable with some generalizations in either direction, to be honest. Gen
Right.
X, like myself, not entirely money grubbing people, but at the same time, I think there are benefits, I think, to talking about generational cohorts. I'm glad we're doing it a little bit. But
Absolutely.
I wonder, when you think about Gen Z, you're talking to friends, you're talking to family, colleagues, just these kinds of things. What's the general perception out there in Generation Z about the perception around employers themselves?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think an important one that we all need to be paying attention to right now, because my generation, I think, is more skeptical of employers than probably any other generation. And I think it's rightfully so. One thing I really admire about my generation is that we're a critical group. We want to dive in there. We want to know what's really going on. We want to know what's the true driver and motivation of an organization, a business, and what am I going to be doing? What is my generation going to be doing to progress that? And what's the larger impact of our work? So I think that's one aspect of it. And we're really critical of it. But I also think in today's world, the work environment's different than it ever has been. If you would have looked at work 25 years ago, it's completely different than work today. I think a long time ago, not even a long time ago, I mean, we can even go back 5 years, I'd say, you saw a very strong loyalty to the business, to the company that you were supporting. And I think that loyalty went both ways. I think companies were really loyal to their employees and employees were really loyal to their companies. And yeah, transitions would happen there to there, but it wasn't nearly at the extent of today's market. I think personally, I'm 25 years old and I've been a part of a layoff already, and if you look across the tech industry, you'll see that layoffs are happening at every major company right now. And these are people who've been loyal to that company for over 20 plus years. They felt security. They felt like that was their home, their family. And then they wake up, not even a message from their boss, just an email, and they've lost their access.
Right.
So I think people are a little shaken up a little bit right now. And I think that's seen across Gen Z. We're witnessing that firsthand. But then these people who have been loyal for so long are experiencing it for the first time. And so we're thinking from a Gen Z perspective, well, do I really want to be that loyal to a company, when I could work for 20 years and then all of a sudden the door is slammed in my face? So there's a little bit of distrust, I think, from Gen Z, but I also think that we're not at a standstill with it. I think there's hope moving forward, but generally, I think we're a little critical of employers right now, and we're not sure of what that future looks like.
Yeah, and I think that's fair to say that trust has been hurt on both sides, really. And
Yeah,
I talked to the employer side, right? And a lot of times it's like, where's the loyalty? People move around after even 6 months. That never used to happen. Otherwise, they'd be job hoppers, et cetera. And I'm thinking, well, I'm looking at the headlines and, and I talk to candidates, I talk to Gen Z people, it's the same thing. It's like, where's the loyalty, right? And so I
Right.
think there used to be this sort of mentality, even by the time I entered the workforce. I never entered the workforce with an idea that I was going to have one job at one company for the rest of my life, like my uncle did working for a major auto manufacturer. I was like, that was never going to be me. But I think that those days are almost completely gone. It's really an exception now. So, I always try to espouse the sense of partnership. Let's be transparent. Let's be realistic with one another. Let's invest in our young up and coming leaders with the full knowledge that they're going to leave at some point when it makes sense. And hopefully they'll extend the trust in return to say, hey, things are developing a certain way, or let's see if another tour of duty makes sense here or somewhere else or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I'd even go to say that people don't just leave for no reason, right? If you're an employer who continues to take care of your employees, then they're going to want to stay. If they're paid better at your company than they can find elsewhere, if their benefits are stronger with you than someone else, if they're getting that career growth, then they have no motivation to leave. And so I think when, that employer steps up and they're there for their employees, and if Gen Z, any generation really, can feel that they're taken care of and they're heard and the work is still exciting and they're still connected to the purpose, I don't think they're going to want to leave. And so I think it really does. It's both. It takes both parties to make it happen, but it's possible. And I think once we kind of get back to a little bit of our previous, loyalty on each side and that trust is rebuilt, I think we can have, an optimistic future with it.
Yeah, I'll continue to explore Gen Z with you in a second, but I
Yeah.
definitely want to call out that every time I make a point or a post or something on LinkedIn, I'm talking about Gen Z.
Yeah.
Immediately, Gen X people, post-pandemic workers will come in and say, "Hey, not just them, me too. I want those things. I want, some aspect of work-life balance, and I want to make a difference here. This isn't just a Gen Z thing." And I think it really is. It's a human thing. But what's different about Gen Z, in my experience, is the willingness to talk about it. I'll say fight for it. I don't mean it like that, but sort of be vocal about it, and actually make decisions and vote with your feet when you're not getting it. Like the hustle
Right.
culture that used to be celebrated is just all but gone in terms of the social pressures I've seen Gen Z put on one another to say, if you're seen as somebody who's going in that direction, it's almost like countercultural, for your generation. It seems to me, at least.
I think you bring up a really good point. I think our generation is a lot more vocal on our opinions, and we kind of have some confidence, built within us to push back on our employers. I think beforehand, an employer may put a 5 a.m. meeting on your calendar and you're just expected to be there, no pushback. I think our Gen Z generation is really focused on, hey, like, is that necessary? We kind of had an agreement when I came in here that these would be my working hours. I'm happy to be flexible there, but some things are a little out of the bounds of what seems reasonable. And I think it's important that our generation does that because we need to create a work-life balance and a culture around, getting to live your life, but also be happy at your job. And when you're happy at your job, you live a happier life, and honestly, your work is better too. So I think when an employer doesn't immediately take the defensive and kind of push back and get upset and says, hey, like, this person's challenging our traditional view of work. I've not been challenged like this before, but this is the future. So maybe we need to hear them out and see how we can meet in the middle, or, make an exception, or maybe we don't actually just put those meetings at 5 a.m. on their calendars, And so I think it's definitely an interesting time in that front. And I agree with you that it's, universally accepted that people are liking the ideas that, Gen Z has about work.
Yeah. So let's turn our attention to the scorecard a little bit. I know from research and conversations that Gen Z is absolutely looking for coaching and development, feedback, these types of things. My question to you, Brian, is in general, are they getting it?
That's a great question. I think that it's been ingrained in the culture to, get coaching and development a little bit. Some people miss the mark. Some people have been really great about it from the beginning. I think where there's a disconnect is what is motivating, this mentorship and this coaching, what angle, an employer takes to provide this coaching and mentorship. What I've found is that the traditional ways of going about things are kind of gone. So if you're going to take a model that maybe was used if you're an older generation, right? And you take that same model that someone used for you to coach and mentor you, and you try to apply it to someone who's Gen Z, it's not going to work. It's not going to be that motivational. It's not going to inspire the outcome that you're probably hoping. I think, and I'll speak for myself, but also my peers that I've spoken to about this, that we want the coaching and mentorship, but if you're just going to tell us to work hard and, dive in, that's not really going to inspire the change. What's going to inspire the change is really highlighting the social impact of working hard. Hey, you work hard, not only may you get a pay increase or a title increase, but let's quantify what that social impact looks like. Let's quantify the influence that you're going to have across this organization and what that means for the world. Our company's aiming to do X, Y, and Z. You're part of that right now is this, but if you are able to work hard and you're able to give into the business, and you can move into that higher position, and then your impact is even larger. And that's what excites people. Money's important, titles are important, but it's the social impact, in my opinion, for our generation.
Here's one of the things I learned early on when it comes to leadership. The best leaders know how to build trust and motivate their people. And there are two ways you can do this. The first is to spend a whole bunch of time you don't have fumbling around and trying to figure out what makes the people around you tick. I wouldn't recommend that approach. The better technique is to use readily available tools to fast forward the insights you need so you can spend more time leading and less time playing guessing games. One of my favorite people first tools comes from the Predictive Index. The Predictive Index, affectionately known as PI, makes it easy to understand what each individual on your team needs out of a manager so you can personalize your leadership approach to get the best results. I can tell you with 100% certainty that the PI tools work for me, and they'll work for you too. I was first introduced to the Predictive Index way back in 2007, and it changed my leadership. 10 years ago, I joined the company, and I've been proud to contribute to the development of talent optimization and the PI tools that make it possible in organizations of all shapes and sizes. Using PI, you can coach, motivate, and develop each of your direct reports on their terms so you can move up in your career with less stress. Visit predictiveindex.com to learn more. To make it even easier for you, I'll put a link in the show notes. And now, let's get back to the show. Yeah, it's one of the biggest things that I try to emphasize for myself and in my own leadership, which is talking about just reducing as best we can on, the emphasis on self and self-interest, right? And I think one of the biggest mistakes, to your point, that I see is when we give feedback that's like, well, how do you think you're going to end up like me someday? And you're like, well, I don't know. You've got a heart condition, you're divorced, you're estranged from your kids, you're a workaholic. What makes you think I want to be like you? I mean, I'm taking that to the extreme, but I think it's really a fair point of a lot of times as leaders, we think, well, this is what it took for me to reach this level. But those were in the old days. Those times are gone. So you have a different generation, a different world of work, but a similar aim in the sense that the company has a vision and a mission. People want to do good work. They want to have an impact, as you're saying. It's just that we have to look at the opportunity through their eyes. I love what you're saying. This is a fundamental leadership principle. It's not about you and what it took to get where you are. It's about the future. And you're trying to develop the bench strength that's in your Gen Z workforce. You got to meet them with where they are and with what they want.
Exactly. I could not have said it better. I agree with you.
It's so interesting when you say that you talk about Gen Z, and I'm wondering, there is this heightened sense of meaning and purpose in day-to-day work, it seems. Right? Is that really just kind of a generalization, or are you really seeing it in almost all industries or types, like water cooler type conversation? Is it as pervasive, I guess, is the question, the search for meaning and purpose across Gen Z as I read about?
I think so. I know that every single day when I wake up, I want to feel like I'm a part of something bigger than myself. We're given a limited time on this earth, and no day is guaranteed. And you want to know that what you're spending 8, 9, 10 hours a day working on is going to have a broader impact that's going to be better for this world. That what you spend the majority of your life doing is going to inspire change. It's going to leave a legacy, and that, you can go to sleep happy knowing that you did something for the greater good that day. And, I think maybe previously our society didn't have the privilege of thinking like that. But again, we are a progressed society. We are moving forward. We are developing every single day. And now, as an employee, we have the freedom to find a role that gives us that sense of purpose and meaning in our day-to-day lives. And so, when you have the option to work, 10 hours a day to something that maybe doesn't have that great of a purpose, or the mission is only to make more money, versus the opportunity to work towards something that's going to change people's lives every single day, most people would choose to work towards something that's going to change people's lives every single day. And obviously that's not everyone's mission, but personally, most of the Gen Z that I've talked to really feel that way, and I do too. So
It's funny. We used to, like, in prior generations, we would always talk about the midlife crisis. When you get to be around 50, you start recognizing that your time is short, and you're like, "Oh my gosh, I've only got so much left. I want to make sure I live life in line with my values." And then people do all kinds of interesting things. But
right.
I like to talk about, sometimes I call it the quarter life. It's not necessarily a crisis, but we'll call it a quarter life crisis, where it's like, okay, I've been in college and I've had all these ideals and things, and now I enter the workforce. So I'm like, oh, now I have to reconcile a real day job with my ideals and wanting this sort of work-life balance. And those things can come at loggerheads. And so when student debts are high and rents are high, a lot of Gen Z is forced to stay at home longer than they may want to, or certainly that their parents would want them to. Then all of a sudden it's like all this stuff comes to loggerheads, right? And so I think it's just very interesting to see that as a generation waking up to this notion that you just shared, which is like, our time is short, and we want to do things that have an impact, that are going to outlast us, and also, enjoy ourselves, while we're doing them. That's very profound.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of talking about the quarter life crisis too. I don't have a Gen Z friend that has not had a quarter life crisis, that has not contemplated the work that they're doing on the day to day and asked themselves, do I really want to be doing this? Is this what I'm looking at? The people way ahead of me, and I don't know that I want to be them. I don't know that this is the career for me. I don't know that what impact I'm making right now is going to fulfill me later on. And I can't speak to the older generations, but I did always hear about that life crisis that happens when you're in your 40s or 50s. But I'd say that crisis is happening for Gen Z now. We are feeling that already. We are 25, we're 26, we're 21, 22, we're entering the workforce, and we're already feeling those things. And it's an interesting space to be in. But I think it's refreshing to know that we're able to think about that on a broader scale now, because it allows us to do something that is fulfilling. I would say it's contributed to social media too. We get to see a lot more of the world on the day to day. We're not just focused and siloed in. We drive to work, we go to work, we come home, and that's all we really know. Like, we're seeing all these opportunities every single day on a massive scale. It's almost like drinking water from a fire hydrant. There's
Right.
opportunities left and right being shown to you that probably weren't shown to other generations.
But I think knowing that is a real advantage to, the enlightened leaders out there who are saying, I have an opportunity to work with the Gen Z people who are on my team, for example, to help them either get clear about what really matters to them, find ways to express that in the work they're doing while they're with me, knowing that they won't be with me forever.
Yeah,
But ultimately trying to create those critical connections, right? Then all of a
absolutely.
sudden you're leading from a position of empathy and some measure of compassion, but also performance, because somebody who feels like the work they do matters, if you can connect those dots for them, they're going to be that much more energized, enthused, engaged when it comes to that work. So it's not a completely selfless act to do that, but what a great opportunity, as long as we have that realization. So I really appreciate you sharing that with us. I just, it's funny, you can read about these things. I'll never be a Gen Z person, obviously, but I think just hearing firsthand from you, having the experience, and as thoughtful as you are, I really appreciate the perspective that you're giving us.
Absolutely. Well, I'm enjoying kind of being the spokesperson today for it.
Yeah, I want to shift us to something that I know you're super passionate about. And it's the fact that Gen Z doesn't always, they want fair value. You want fair value for the work that you're doing, but that doesn't automatically or always happen. So tell me some reasons, or maybe expand on that a little bit. I know this is a big touch button for you.
Absolutely. Well, one, I think that generally speaking, compensation across, as a recruiter, right? I deal with negotiating offers every single day. I hear people's candidate expectations. I hear employers and how they want to pay for a role. I've seen it multiple companies across the board, been almost so much in this space that I can't escape it. When I'm going to bed at night, it keeps me up. But what I've found across Gen Z is that we're not taught in school what our value is, what that education, what that diploma really means in a quantifiable way once we graduate and we go into the workforce. And I can say most of my friends do not negotiate their salaries. They're given a salary, and whether they're excited about it or they're disappointed about it, if they need to take that role, they take it and they don't push back. And I think it bothers me because as a recruiter, I know that the biggest thing is that there's always room to negotiate. Even if you're an entry-level employee, recruiters a lot of times are anticipating that negotiation. We're not going to give you, the first offer because we're anticipating that you're going to push back, and we need to be able to pay you within the range that the business can actually afford. And so then a lot of my generation doesn't know that we can do that yet. And I think it leads to this discontent because they're feeling like, well, I need to find a new job because I can't afford these rent prices or a gallon of milk because it's now $3 more than it was, I don't know, 2 years ago. It's the rates that, produce is increasing, our rents are increasing, is not at the same rate that our salary is increasing, which is why Gen Z really needs to be advocating for themselves, and they need to be more aware that they can be their own advocate. They can negotiate their salaries, but at the same time, we're not taught that. And it's a hard conversation to have, especially when you're younger, to feel that, hey, I know my worth, I know my value, and handle that conversation in a respectful way. There's a way to go about it. You can't just go in there and demand more money, but you can say like, hey, I'm really excited about this opportunity. Is there any room to negotiate? My expectations were 5,000 more than what they're currently offering you. They may say yes, they may say no. No one's ever getting their offers rescinded for asking for a little bit more money. And so I just wish conversations around that happen more. And I think there is, a sense of responsibility on the employer side when it comes to Gen Z to make sure that they're being paid equitably for their work, and recognizing that work is a little bit more expensive now than it was 10 years ago. So,
Right.
yeah.
And on the employer side, might be thinking, well, how am I supposed to afford this? Well, the answer is if we create a workplace that's accommodating and fair. I always like to say performance is non-negotiable. We're going to get job performance. If not, we have a different problem. But assuming that's been met, let's do the things that keep all generations happy at work, whether they need job flexibility because they've got young kids at home, whether they're Gen Z, whatever it might be. And when that happens, then we start to reduce the turnover. We reduce the need to go out and pay more recruiting fees to bring more people in who are just going to churn anyway. We reduce all the ramp time and the training costs. There's plenty of money if we do things the right way, right? And so why not give a little bit more, right? Because we're getting better productivity from creating all this stuff. It kind of heals itself. On the paper, if we just look at the spreadsheet, it looks like, well, we can't afford to pay people more. It's like, oh, you're paying already. You're just paying in a really inefficient way because of how you've shaped your workplace.
Yeah, it's so interesting what $5,000 more up front, divided across the year may actually be a $50,000 mistake later on, because the turnover costs, the recruiting fees, the additional time and resources that are spent just on finding someone new once that person leaves for a higher compensation somewhere else is a lot more than that $5,000 base salary increase.
And not to belabor the point, but for our audience, the other thing that happens is when you lose somebody, and we're in this indefinite talent shortage right now, you're creating so much strain from that missing person on the other team members who are in all the different generations, and their level of burnout is higher, and their level of engagement is lower, and their absenteeism is higher as a result. So everything is connected. This is my philosophical coming out.
I love it.
My Buddhist philosophy, but everything is connected. It just is. So I think when we start doing the numbers a little bit differently, then all of a sudden things make a lot more sense. But let's stay on this employer for a second. I'm the employer. Yeah. I want to do all I can, let's say, to attract top talent. What are some things that you would have me know, Brian, about, look, you want to make yourself appealing to Gen Z top talent. Like, what should I know?
Absolutely. Great question. I think there's three things here. The first one, equitable wage and compensation that we just talked about. Pay people fairly. People want to stick around. Two, I think a social impact. really having, a reason for the work that you're doing and communicating that, helping the person know in the job their broader impact across the team, across the organization, across the world. And then I would say a work-life balance. Let people have a flexible work environment. I saw something on LinkedIn the other day, which I really loved, and it said, what flexible work looks like for me is on a Tuesday afternoon, maybe I leave a little early and I get to go on the golf course with some friends, but then Sunday, afternoon when I'm feeling inspired, I get on for 3 hours and I start doing some work. And maybe after dinner, I send a few more emails, but I got to spend breakfast with my kids before school. It's this idea that, the traditional 9 to 5, or honestly, like 7 to 6. I feel like I don't know many people who actually work this 9 to 5 type work. I got meetings early, I got them late. It just, you kind of have to adjust, but it's really being flexible to say, hey, when you feel creative, when you're able to get some work done, get your work done, and the employer trusts you to do that. And I think that's really the 3 things that are important for my generation.
I love it. Three good tips, and then honor those commitments once you make them. That social contract, don't break it. Hugely important. Brian, I'm gonna get you out of here with my easiest question of the day. Where can my listeners go to learn more about you?
Well, follow me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to connect. I'm happy to be a resource. If you're in Los Angeles by chance, we can check out a new coffee shop. But yeah, Brian Phillips, Brian Phillips, Phillips on LinkedIn. Happy to be a resource.
I love it. It's a classic Gen Z thing to say. Meet me up at a coffee shop. Gen X would be like, stay the hell away from me. No.
Oh, true.
No, I'm just kidding. Maybe that might just be me.
Hey,
Brian, I can't thank you enough for sharing your insights today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Here are my multi-generational top 3 takeaways from today's episode. 1. Seek to understand. Gen Z is bringing a very different emphasis regarding their interests in social impact, sustainability, and work-life balance. Rather than try to change them, first listen and learn about their interests. 2. Coach with caution. Gen Z wants coaching around the things they want and not necessarily what older or more experienced mentors want them to want. Focus on impact and growth. 3. Pay fair. Inexperienced Gen Z workers may not advocate for themselves when it comes to fair pay. Build trust and mutual commitment by ensuring all workers are paid fairly today and tomorrow. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Strong reviews help shows like mine get noticed. And be sure to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss your next opportunity to learn, lead, and live at your best. Thanks for making this investment in your leadership ability, and thanks for sharing this podcast with another aspiring leader who needs to hear it. All right, leaders, until next time, don't just manage the business when you can lead the people.